Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. On today's show, we're going to venture outside of real estate for a few minutes and talk about software. This is really a discussion about business economics, and those principles apply to every industry. Over the past 20 years, one of the most attractive business models in technology has been the software as a service model, or what's called SaaS. It used to be back in the day that applications ran locally on your computer, but today, many of those applications run in the cloud. Instead of buying a piece of software, you rent it each and every month. From the software company's perspective, it's wonderful. They have recurring, predictable revenue. Investors love recurring revenue, and software companies have been valued accordingly. But artificial intelligence might be starting to challenge the fundamental economics of that model. We recently conducted an audit of the software subscriptions inside our own business. Like many companies, we'd accumulated numerous applications over the years: accounting software, project management software, communication tools, document management, customer relationship management systems, design tools, numerous specialized applications. What became obvious is that we were paying for a tremendous amount of capability, and a lot of it we just were not using, at least not to the full extent of its capability. In several cases, we were subscribing to the highest tier because at some point somebody believed we needed a particular feature. When we looked carefully at the actual usage, we discovered that the more basic version accomplished virtually everything we needed. We downgraded several subscriptions and in some cases reduced the cost by more than 50%. Did our productivity decline? Not at all, which raises an interesting question. What exactly were we paying for? Historically, developing your own software would have been prohibitively expensive. If you want a customized application, you'd need to hire a product manager, a software architect, a bunch of programmers, verification folks, database specialists, and someone responsible for the ongoing maintenance. You'd be literally spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Under those circumstances, paying a few $100s a month for someone else's software made perfect sense. But AI is changing that equation. Today, someone who understands their business process can increasingly describe what it is that they want and use AI-assisted development, sometimes called vibe coding, to create a relatively sophisticated internal application. Now, suppose your company uses only 10% of the functionality of a large project management platform. What if instead you built exactly the workflow your organization needs? You define the projects, you define the approval process, you define the reports, you define the database fields, you define exactly how information flows through the organization. Instead of changing your business process to accommodate someone else's software, the software accommodates your business process. That's actually a better system, and there's something inherently attractive about that. But before declaring the SaaS industry dead, we want to distinguish between development cost and lifecycle cost. These are very different things. And by the way, if you remember, I come from the tech industry. Creating one version of an application might seem astonishingly inexpensive today, but maintaining that application over a longer lifespan is another matter. All kinds of things change. Operating systems change, security vulnerabilities emerge, programming interfaces change, browsers change, regulations change. Then employees request new features, the databases grow. Somebody still needs to understand how the system works when something eventually breaks. It's that lifecycle cost that's difficult to quantify. But even here, the economics are changes. Because you see, you don't need to necessarily build everything. What if you decide to use a mature open source database as the underlying repository? You could use that commercially developed and supported cloud infrastructure. All of the authentication, the security can come from an established provider. The document storage could use another standardized platform. But then you only need to build the thin application layer that reflects your company's unique business process. That has some similarities with real estate development. For example, you wouldn't build an entire town with all the infrastructure just to build a building. You would go into a place where that infrastructure exists, where all the city services are in place, and then you build your building there. Software is increasingly moving in that direction. So is the SaaS model fundamentally broken? Not really, but I think there is a large category of SaaS applications that are quite vulnerable. If the primary value proposition is simply a collection of features sitting on top of a database, that might not be a defensible moat. Customers will increasingly ask, why should they pay $20, $50, $100, $500 a month forever for simple functionality that could be described in a very thin application layer? The SaaS products that remain defensible will need something harder to replicate. Maybe it's proprietary data, maybe it's the network effect, maybe it's regulatory compliance, or some kind of extraordinary integration with hundreds of other systems. And maybe the cost of switching can be legitimately high enough that the application that sits at the center of a mission-critical application is never going to move. Those are genuine barriers. But just because it's got a few more features is probably not enough. The irony is that the software company spent 20 years convincing customers that ownership was obsolete and subscriptions were superior. And AI now seems to shift some of that power back to the customer. Businesses can increasingly ask a very simple question. What capability do I actually need? Maybe go out and buy the standardized components, build a proprietary workflow, and eliminate everything else. That's not just a technology decision, it's a capital allocation. And whenever technology fundamentally changes the cost of producing something, you should expect the existing customer business model to eventually change with it. As you think about this, take a look at the software subscriptions inside your own business. You might be surprised by how much you're paying for capability that you rarely use. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.